horse drifted alarmingly in the betting was, fancied in the morning, continued to drift. It was late on the exchanges to lose. It was something you'd see in a Dick Francis novel, Charles Buttons.
The ground is soft.
It's heavy.
It's soft on times.
It's heavy.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Bar Stewards Inquiry Sunday Sermon Special. Yes, we've got a returning guest this evening, a special one at that. It's trainer Stuart Williams. Welcome, Stuart, back to the Bar Stewards for the second time, the only person of any note to get invited a second time.
I feel honoured. Thank you very much for inviting me back.
Absolutely. You were a great guest last time and we chatted a lot of racing politics, what's wrong with the game, etc., etc. How do you think it's gone since?
Well, I like to think most of us horse people are optimists because the next foal born is going to be Frankel. The next yearling we buy is going to be a 2,000 guineas winner. The next horse I buy at the horses in training sale is going to turn into Quinault. We're always very optimistic, but I fear for the way it's going. The most important thing that you guys have been banging on about, honestly, for years. No, you've been banging on about it for years. But the biggest income stream, bar our owners, are the punters. And if they can't have a bet, we're all doomed. The whole game is doomed if they can't have a bet. It will go back to how it was racing in the 1800s, where the very, very rich people raced against each other for their own purses, if we're not careful about the affordability checks that are going to be coming in very soon.
Do you think personally that the powers that be, we don't have to mention them, racing's leadership, if you like, plus the racing media, have they done enough for the sport? I mean, we've had the petition, actually reached 100,000 signatures, and this will, of course, be debated in Parliament on the 26th of February. But are we selling ourselves a bit short, Stuart, do you think?
Honestly, I cannot believe that British public can sort of sit by and let the government decide how any of us spend our money. I mean, there's just no way that normal, everyday folks are going to let bookmakers look at their bank details. It's just not going to happen. And I can't believe a Conservative government is suggesting this should happen. But
Yeah.
we've got so far down the road now. I heard you talking the other night about the debate that's upcoming in Parliament. And I kind of agree that it's a box ticking exercise that just sort of waves it through. As you've been saying for ages, you could go to the stock market and blow all your money on the stock market and no one will care. No one gives a stuff. What's the difference? There's no difference at all.
Not with the way racing works. I mean, for example, since the introduction of the exchange back in the early 2000s, that is literally a carbon copy of a spread betting stroke financial CFD trading model where on a day you can go on IG and you can deposit £10,000, well I can with a credit card, and I can decide to buy the pound against the dollar per tick. And that to me is exactly the same as the betting exchange where I can say, do you know what? Stuart Williams has got one fancied today, but I don't like it because it hung last time and it hung fire, and I'm not so sure this will win today. And I can take an opposing view and like sell the horse. In other words, I'm saying this price is too short.
Well, you're scarcely taking on Stuart Williams back.
Well, the famous saying from a track bookmaker, I'm going to name him and shame him, Albion Racing. He said, God, when that Stuart Williams lot piling, this is back in the day, this isn't now. He says, God, he says, there's nothing left in anyone's satchels. And not only that, they don't leave you enough to buy your lunch. Classic statement. I've always loved that statement. And of course, on one of our future podcasts, Stuart Williams' horse, famous one at Nottingham, The Big Gamble, features in our top gambles of all time. So don't miss that podcast going forward. So Stuart, so coming back to where we're at, like you say, the problem is we've got ministers that are talking about this now. And the problem is we live in a virtuous world, like you say, a box-ticking world where, I'm sorry, but like defending gambling from a politician's point of view now probably isn't a massive vote winner in the outside world.
No, but defending people's liberty to spend their own money how they like should be.
Yes.
If you canvassed every person in the country and said, "Do you think the government should tell you how to spend the money in your wages?" Every one of them would say no. I think we're fighting it on the wrong front. We're fighting this again,
Mhm.
as you say, gambling's bad,
Yeah.
alcohol's bad, cigarettes are bad, everything's bad for you. That's got to go in the bin.
Mhm.
Sugar tax on drinks, everything's bad for you. But we're fighting this on the wrong front. We should be fighting this on the front that the government shouldn't be allowed to tell us how we spend the money in our wages.
But equally, because racing was so slow to oppose the kind of the anti-argument that started 2 or 3 years ago, now the antis are occupying the middle ground. So if you are against them, you are de facto pro gambling harm. And who wants to come out and say, "Oh, I'm in favour of gambling harm"? So they've skillfully occupied that middle ground. Whereas in fact, where they should be on the continuum is on the extreme kind of left, as it were, using a continuing argument. And that's the problem, because if you're against them, you must be in favour of people ruining their lives with gambling. Well, no one's in favour of that. And that's the problem. And you're right, the
Yeah.
debate needed to be reframed. Well, this is a civil liberty argument. What next? Alcohol, tobacco, holidays, perhaps? Football season tickets? What next? And that's the problem. And I think racing has lost ground by not arguing on the basis that you suggest. You're right.
I think, and obviously, I know, like Stuart, from a sort of trainer's perspective, it's got to be sort of careful of what you can't shoot from the hip regarding the BHA, etc. Because let's be fair, the BHA are an organisation that, for me, I'm allowed to criticise it like vehemently, and they're an organisation that I've come out publicly and welcomed the white paper, welcomed the Gambling Commission statement on affordability. No, it's not welcome. It's not welcome in this sport. And the fact they're now being sort of like two-faced regarding, and I'm not about the BHA, I'm about the Gambling Commission and government, about gambling harm regarding the lottery. So the lottery's fine. No, it's fine. Scratch cards, you take your credit card into WH Smith's and buy 50 scratch cards. Yeah, lovely, lovely.
I bought 20 fags earlier, and the woman in front of me spent £100 on a card on scratch cards. And no affordability check, no means check. £100 she bought. There you go.
And sadly for us full timers, that I've been called a parasite in the past for being a professional punter, if you like, doing this for a living, pay my bills. But I'm someone that's also ploughed money back into the game through horse ownership. I've bought horses, I've supported racing yards, I've supported the industry to boot. I haven't just take as takeout merchants. I've actually put money back in because, as Stuart knows, as a racehorse owner, you're a million to make the game paying sort of 15, 20,000 pounds for horses. You've no chance. You might be able to land a such or two, but it ain't going to happen, like in the long term. Stuart, so where do we go with this now? So you're head of the BHA. What would you do now regarding affordability? What direction would you take?
I think the problem the BHA you've got, they're on sticky ground to start with, because I can't remember exactly how many years ago it was, but when they were doing the fob tea machines in the betting shops, the then head of the BHA, against the horse people's advice, got full square behind the bookmakers in trying to not let them restrict the fob teas in the betting shops. When we said that was a disastrous plan of action,
Mm.
we were of the opinion that we needed to divorce the skill of trying to pick a winner at the racing from the completely random and no guarantee lose options that were fob teas in betting shops and online. So that's one of the reasons the BHA is in a weak position where we are now, because they can't stand up and say we shouldn't be classified with these online gaming companies who are running racing now. The landscape's changed in who actually owns these big betting operators now.
Yeah.
If it was down to me, if I had a magic wand, I'd be going to the government and saying, look, we have got some of the best racing in the world. We've got some of the best horses in the world. We've got some of the best people in the world. They're just not being rewarded as they should be under the system as it is at the moment. And I'd try and get a system in place along the line of the Australian system, which is pretty much the same. Big gaming operators are operating in Australia as they operate here. The same people own the companies. So there's
Yeah.
no reason why you couldn't tear up what we've got, start again, and put the Australian system in place where everyone would be better off and we'd have a much better grasp of what we're doing and where we're going. At the moment, there doesn't seem to be any plan, which isn't unusual for the BHA, unfortunately. If I bring it back to racing, we've got a situation now through this winter where we can win more money with a horse rated 0 to 50 than we can with one rated 0 to 70,
Yeah,
which is just bloody bonkers. It gives no incentive for people to try and get your horse rated higher if you can win more money with the ones at the bottom.
indeed.
There's no sense to it at all. And the other night you were talking about Graham Lee. There's that poor kid that got
Yep.
killed at Nichols's the other day. There was an
Yes.
Italian lad got killed at that weekend as well. It's a dangerous sport we're playing here with people's lives at stake on the ground here with our staff as well as on the racecourse. And if the participants aren't getting rewarded well enough for what they're doing, the race that Graham Lee got hurt in, if he'd have won that race, he'd have taken home approximately 350 quid.
Wow.
It's an absolute joke what these people are doing.
Stuart, do you know what I'm surprised at? We've seen it more this winter, but I'm surprised a lot of our Premier jockeys that maybe aren't attached to a retainer or a yard aren't going abroad to ride a lot more often. We've seen, like, obviously in America, Dettori's gone out there, Oisin Murphy.
I think you have. Yeah, O'Sheen's out there, Sean Levy's out there. A lot of the boys are going to Bahrain every weekend, Maidan every week. They're going about.
Adam Beschizza, I think, was top jockey at Fairgrounds for a while. I think he's moved now to Turfway, if I'm correct. But he was doing extremely well at Fairgrounds. Over here, he wasn't picking up many rides, and he ended up top jockey at Fairgrounds, and he's earning millions of dollars in prize money. And this is the thing, like, some of our jockeys, you look at that and think, well, hang on a minute, I'm as good as Adam Beschizza. I could probably do that.
Well, it's the same for me. I mean, I like to think we punch above our weight. With the quality
Yep.
of horse we can afford to buy a lot of the time. And we're usually in the top 35, 50 trainers in the country. We've never broke £1 million. We got close a couple of times. We've never broke £1 million in prize money. If I'd have been doing the same thing in America, I'd have broke 5 million every year for the last 10 years.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's a no-brainer, isn't it? And you'd think that the BHA would be worried about a potential brain drain, because if trainers like you decide, you know what, we're done with Newmarket, we're done with the UK, let's ply our trade elsewhere. But I don't know whether they've recognised that risk, because as you say, if you could earn 5 million quid every season somewhere else, whatever your circumstances might dictate, you may as well decide to do that one day.
Yeah. If I'm honest, the BHA aren't interested in trainers my size. They're just interested in the big yards
Gosh,
and the big days racing, and the rest of us, they're not bothered if I give up.
who prop the sport up 5 days a week.
There's been 2 or 3 this week. Pack up. Henry Spiller decided to
Really?
call it a day, and someone else as well.
Wow. I'd be
Yeah.
worried like hell if I were the BHA, that the people who are, in quotes, bread and butter, and that's not demeaning, but people that supply runners day in, day out, that run of the mill meetings have decided, you know what, I can do something better with my life. I can earn some actual money rather than have all the stress. And yet they don't seem to understand that the foundations are being dismantled. It's bizarre. I don't know.
Stuart, can I ask you a financial sort of question regarding your break-even figures? You're fortunate in a way because obviously you've got great owners in Tom Morley, Opulence. These are really great owners for you.
Yeah.
How is it for you? Are you stressed financially sometimes, like in making it pay as a business?
The first thing I do every year is set out a business plan to make sure I'm in business the next year. I started training with one horse. I'm not from a money background, and I've had to make it pay every year that I've been in training. So I haven't lost money training racehorses because I make it sure it's my business not to. But I don't make huge amounts out of training racehorses. It's a very meager living, relatively. It's a nice lifestyle. And I get to drive a nice car and I'm my own boss, and it's brilliant out on the heath in the morning. There's no better place
Yeah.
on earth. I'd hate to do anything else. But financially, I'd be far better off if I'd done something else for a living, for sure. But the finances come down to how many horses you can have and how many staff you've got to look after them. That's the two biggest things, because everything else just neither here nor there sort of thing. The biggest thing is the paying the staff and getting the owners to pay you for the horses you've got in training. It didn't matter if I've got 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make us more money because the more horses I have, the more staff I have to employ, and the extra money I get is going on the wages for the staff and stuff like that. The only thing that would increase our profit margin would be getting better quality horses and winning better prize money. And that's extremely difficult to do.
Yeah. We shall move on now to Premierisation, and particularly with Premierisation, also has come Sunday night racing. Forgive my cynical self that has always said that this is purely designed to maximise bookmaker take, which on the funding model, of course, that makes sense because the funding model is set to make money out of losers or losing bets. Now, the Premierisation as it stands, it's early days. It's not working very well, and obviously that's causing problems with the fixture list, etc., etc. But first of all, Stuart, I'd like to get your take from your side of things and your staff side of things about Sunday night racing.
Well, no one wants to go racing on Sunday night.
No.
Like literally no one wants to go racing on Sunday night. But this is part of the problem, is that because of the media rights money that go primarily to the racecourses, that the racecourses have mostly gone down the road of, we don't want anyone there. So they just want a race meeting. And this goes back to the racecourses, the bookmakers, and the BHA hand in hand have, over the last sort of 10 or 12 years, gone down the route of let's pile it high and sell it cheap. And they want a race every 5 minutes. It doesn't matter if there's anyone actually physically there to watch it. In fact, we'd prefer if there wasn't. And let's just get the media rights money because that's where the money is. There's loads of media rights money coming in now. We can put a little bit of prize money on. We can attract runners, and that will attract the media rights. People can bet at home, and everyone's happy. That isn't good for racing.
No.
That isn't good for getting people. It's a spectator sport, and it's really exciting going racing if they make it so. But when they make it that no one needs to be there, they don't really want a crowd. They don't put on good facilities when people turn up. You were talking about the Newbury food and stuff like that sort of thing. And it's one of those things where the only reason they're putting racing on Sunday night is to get stay-at-home punters to bet on it. Now, there's good money on. I can't sit at home and say to my owner, I'm not going to run in that 30 grand race on Sunday night. I'm going to run in a 8 grand race the next Tuesday.
Yep.
And it's got a decent chance of winning both. That would be crazy. But the problem is that 30 grand race is a 30 grand race because they've taken 2 grand out of the 10 grand race that was on Tuesday and made it an 8 grand race. It's not new money. It's money that was there anyway. It was just in smaller races. And they've reduced the price of those smaller races to put a few big races on Sunday night to make it look like there's loads of prize money about.
Yeah. So what do you think to the cloak and daggerness of all this media rights money, where obviously Martin Cruddas has come out with left and right hooks saying, no, we're not going to say what these amounts are. Have you a private inkling of what these amounts are?
Well, we've been told by some of the courses what the amounts are. The trouble is that different courses and different racecourse groups have done different deals on the media rights. So some of the deals are different from the others. And also, there's a wide variety and variation in how much of the actual racecourse's revenue that media rights are. If you talk to Ascot and York, they'll tell you their media rights is a pittance compared to their revenue because they're based on getting customers through the door and looking after people and being a proper racecourse. Whereas the ARC model is based on getting as much media rights money as they can every meeting. And they don't really want a big crowd at most of the meetings most of the time.
Did you ever get approached RE flapping? Because I heard some trainers got actually approached by ARC to see if they'd be interested in doing ARC racing that isn't licensed by the BHA. Did you ever get approached?
No, I've never heard of that before. No.
I've got contacted by, I won't name names,
Yeah.
and you can believe that though, can't you? Because
Yeah.
ARC, for example, like you've just said, They don't want customers. They don't want to do a jacket potato van or look after the customer. It's like, oh, no, that's staff and expenses, and let's just employ 3 people to run the track that day.
They have 40% of the programme now.
Yeah. Do you think that's a bit naughty to tracks like Chelmsford, that Chelmsford have tried to put on good money in races to try and attract more meetings, and yet ARC seem to be favourably treated in terms of getting extra meetings? You know, like in the winter when, we're going to put some extra all-weather meetings on. It's mostly ARC that get the extra meetings. Are you a subscriber to that also, that ARC maybe be getting a little bit favourable treatment here?
So again, I'm not privy to this process, and it's something to do with the RCA as well as the BHA. It's not just a BHA deal. They do have to, for the BHA fixtures, there's a bidding process. And I did hear, not late, it wasn't last year, it was the year before, that Chelmsford had bid a certain price, which was way above what the other courses were bidding for a certain BHA meeting that was being auctioned off. And apparently the RCA cancelled the bidding process because they bid too much.
Wow.
And what they bid is they bid prize money. So Chelmsford were going to put on really good prize money for this meeting to make sure they got the meeting. And the bidding process was withdrawn by the RCA on the basis that Chelmsford had bid too much. So there probably is something in that, what you're saying.
I mean, these are all things that it's hard to make like concrete accusations without firm evidence. But with the way racing's going and what I'm being told and how I'm seeing it, it's not a level playing field for all, as you've highlighted yourself, saying about the BHA don't seem to care about the smaller yards, the smaller operations, just about bigger concerns that's good for them, good for the image of racing. We can splash this all over the media, but then the smaller yards don't seem to get anywhere near in terms of equal attention. Talking about like Premierisation, are you like me on this, Stuart, where you see it as like a future blueprint for 10:30 a.m. starts and an 8:30 p.m. finish most days?
The first thing is, I think, to give them some credit, they've at least done something.
Yeah.
Something needed to be done. They couldn't just sit on their hands and do nothing. What they've come up with, I'm not sure is the way to go, but they might work that out after a while and go in a different direction. To say there are 174 race meetings that are Premier is, going to be stretching it, because there aren't enough good horses to run in those races if you call them all Premier. If the Premier ones are the top quality ones, there aren't enough horses to run in 174 top quality meetings.
No.
So they're going to have to give and take a little bit. And whether that gets refined a little bit, and I don't think it's a bad idea to try and identify in the public's imagination, this is a Premier meeting, this is something special.
Yes.
But we need to make the product special if they're going to do that. It's no good saying to them, this is something special, and then having the same old race meeting and they don't know the difference from last week.
Exactly. And they need to look after the paying clientele and maybe take a little bit less commission from vendors. I've spoke to vendors before about the kind of commission that tracks take from them. I think the burger man at Leicester, who's excellent, we love a burger. He said, I think that Leicester want 40% of his take. Well, I'm sorry, but then it's all he does. Instead of charging £6 for a burger, he charges £9. And it's the public that have to pay for that percentage that the racecourse are demanding. Like, it's too high. You should be glad that there's really good food and street vendors that are bringing the vans to racecourses, making it a better day out for racegoers with better food.
Well, that's absurd, isn't it? 40%, because I know in the days when Harrods used to have the pet spa there, a friend of my wife's used to operate that, and they used to take 50%, but that was fine because A, it's Harrods. B, the margins on dog grooming and the pet products were so high that they could take a 50% hit on it. But you're talking about a burger van at Leicester being asked to give up 40%, and that's plainly mad, isn't it?
Well, this is it. The track seems to be a little bit on the greedy side on several things. And I think, again, it's all about common sense, and you need to look after your punters. I do think that Charlotte, another plug here, Go Racing in Yorkshire, does this extremely well. There's a lot of deals on in Yorkshire. It's a great place to come, and I'm not just shamelessly plugging this, it's the truth. From what I see with my own eyes when I go racing, I do think the northern tracks do a lot right. All don't, but some do. Come racing in Yorkshire is the message. Right, talking about the fixture list, Stuart, how acceptable is it that at the time of recording this podcast, the fixture list, we don't know what's happening in March.
Yeah, it's just landed today.
Has it
So,
landed today? It would
yeah,
do. Of course it would do. Of course
yeah,
it would.
it's just landed today. But yeah, I agree with you entirely that we need to think 6 months in advance with some of these horses, not just round the corner sort of thing.
No.
There's no reason why they can't put the big races in place and say, right, this is what we're going to have here, 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 all these premier meetings. These are the races we're going to have on, and then leave a gap race, if you like. And then if they've missed one out, they can fill the gap in as they're going along. For the life of me, I can't understand why we haven't been saying this for years. And I've said it at the trainers' meetings and I've said it to the BHA. They've got all our information. They've got all our horses. All they need to do every month, I have to register my list of horses in training every month. Every new one that comes in, I have to register it straight away. So all they need to do is have a tick box by the side of each one of those horses, and I could tick it and say, right, this one's ready to run in the next 3 months. This one's ready to run. This one's not going to be ready to run for 6 months. And then they've got an idea of the whole population of which horses are going to be ready to run for the next 3 months
Yeah.
and write a program for those horses. It shouldn't be that difficult. And they just don't seem to have managed to grasp it. And we get repetitions of races where you'll have the same race for the same horse 3 times in a week. And then you'll have gaps where you've got nothing for one horse for 4 or 5 weeks. And all right, they leave you a system where you can ring up and say, look, there's nothing for this horse for 4 or 5 weeks. But it shouldn't need to come to that. There should be a system in place where it picks all of those up automatically.
I don't know what system they've got, but that could easily be computerized by a skilled programmer to analyze all the horses, distance requirements. Like you say, your horse is ready to run within 6 weeks. It would have a database, analyze the distances, the class, the ratings, and then say, right, this is the perfect fixture list for that particular time of year. That's what we need to do. But like you say, apart from the big races, which always stand.
Do you not think, though, Ray, that that level of thought going into the programme would actually excuse the delay? Whereas what we see in practice, where you can look on tomorrow's card, for example, and the card's got like 3 past winners for every race. So basically, they're just duplicating year on year on year.
Yeah.
There's not even that level of thought going into it.
Now, I'm sure that you could get some really sharp minds on this, and there's plenty of sharp minds in racing. I think this is what annoys me with the BHA, and it's the same when you get quangos like the Gambling Commission, for example. They set up these quangos and they employ staff that are not qualified to do the job. And you can see the tide's gone out, they're in the speedos, and then everyone's complaining and moaning. Do you have to be a certain ilk? Do you have to be Sanders, John, to get a BHA nod, if you like, to work?
You wouldn't be let in the door.
I'm sorry, I could sit round with those guys for a day, and I'll guarantee you, I'd be kicked out. But
We had rude letters.
yeah, I know, they hate me. We've had literature from them, so they know they hate us. This is what you're dealing with. Rather than trying to make good for the sport, they just seem to close off from good ideas. Let's have some good ideas sent in.
They probably spent as long on that letter to us as they did on the fixture list.
Well, it was a very long letter, wasn't it, about grossly offensive content, which was interesting.
Yeah.
I was quite proud of that. We got that framed, actually. Yeah, it's quite.
I had to grovelingly apologise for fear of expensive litigation. Anyway, how it is, that's the game. That's what we're in. We all want the same thing. Stuart wants the same thing. I want the same. We all want the same thing. We want the game to thrive, to prosper. Stuart gets up in the morning, sees Newmarket Heath in its glory, summer and winter, maybe not so much winter, but And the life's worth living, and yet...
But they trade off that, Lee, don't they? As Stuart quite eloquently alluded to, it's a lifestyle business, isn't it? Yes, it's nice if you can make some money out of it, but you should be jolly lucky that you get up and see this glorious heath every morning. And they kind of trade off that. They kind of overlook the commercial aspect of it because it's a lifestyle business. And that's the problem. And racing has continued because there are lots of people like Stuart who are prepared to forego the financial rewards in return for quite a pleasant life. But that's not the basis of running an industry, is it? Eventually people say, well, however lovely it is to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and see the sunrise, ultimately I've got to feed myself. And if I can't do that, or it's becoming increasingly difficult to do that, I'm actually going to take my skills elsewhere and earn more money in another industry. And that's the crying shame that the BHA and others can't seem to see that. There's too much goodwill out there in racing, I think, from people like Stuart. That they are too accommodating. And I'm not suggesting strikes or anything, but ultimately there's going to come a point where people say, no, sorry, can't do it anymore. And that's the problem, I think.
I think we've got a hell of a job convincing Westminster to not go ahead with this. I really think we're in trouble. And how far it's going to go, no one's got any idea. But if affordability checks come in, for example, going back to that, the betting exchange cannot exist because everyone knows, let's say if I don't fancy a horse, right, I'm going to lay just £100 at eights or something. That's £800. Some of the talk from some of the gambling harm groups and the clear stake, for example, the ones that monitor deposits and stuff, they are stating that if you lose £700 in a month, that's the Dutch model apparently, you're automatically referred as at risk of harm. Jesus Christ. Well, that's the end of the exchange then. How can anyone lay a bet? You can't lay or back a bet. It's finished. So the exchange is over. So then where do the sharps go? Where do you encourage people to get into the game? How to study form? How to beat the bookie? Remember, the bookies are our adversaries. It's like how to beat the bookie. Now it's been made that you're not allowed to beat the bookie.
But it's not, though, isn't it? Bookmakers are no longer really adversaries. They are effectively, I think, middlemen now. They're sort of moving once the punters' losses over to winning punters. So they're not really kind of in the business of taking a bet anymore. They're risk management companies, aren't they? It's a bit of a cliche. They're run by accountants, but they're effectively commission agents, aren't they? And it seems to me that the media and the BHA have allowed that to occur. But eventually, as we said, it's kind of like a Ponzi scheme. There's only so many small staking mug punters that you can continually attract to the game before eventually you run out of people that are prepared to play. And Stuart's owners, I dare say, many of whom will like a bet, will come to a point where saying, Stuart, you're a lovely man, you're a great trainer, but I can't get a bet on. So really, I don't really want to spend going to Wolverhampton on a Saturday night is not really what I want to do with my life if I can't have a bet. So I don't know. It just seems that there's no vision really where people need to have vision at the sport. I don't know. It's bizarre.
Well, indeed, we've said this on previous shows about sullying the word gambling. If you carry on to soil a word, as in betting, gambling, right? Not stock market trading, but betting, gambling, then if that passes through a generation, i.e. the youngsters growing up, oh, no, betting's bad.
Mugs game. You can never win. The bookie always wins. You can't beat it. It's a game of chance in the same way as playing the fruit machines is a game of chance in the minds of the public because no one's opposed that view. That's the problem.
And for me, that's where the BHA failed because the model's wrong. Because if you're penalising losers, I'm going to ask Stuart here what he thinks to one of my solutions. I know what Stuart wants. Stuart would love like a whirlpool tour because that would make racing flourish like it does in Hong Kong. I don't think that's ever going to happen or be viable. But what would you think to this, Stuart, where a punter pays maybe 1 to 2% out of every winning online bet and it goes directly into the levy?
That would be another way of funding it. Now, how would you do that on an exchange basis?
Yeah, anything. So like an exchange basis, bookmaking basis. I understand that being a bookmaker is not as simple as what it sounds. Their expenses is also very high because I've seen some figures at what they need a punter to lose to make it pay after they've paid out for the media rights and this and the other. So this isn't a one-sided thing. But if punters help as well by saying, right, you've had a winner, let's say you've £10 at 3 to 1, £30 profit, you pay us a 2% on that £30, so that's 60p. So 60 pence direct into the levy. The bookmaker must pay that yearly, like straight to the levy.
Yeah.
Punter's levy, if you like, to help fund the sport. I'm not totally anti-bookmaker. I'm anti what the model is, which is... So BHA don't want people like me to come into the game, or the Patrick Veachers, your legendary people of that ilk anymore. They want people of just idiots, basically, to do the money, because that's how the model works. And it's wrong. You should be encouraging people to come into the game saying, look, you can win. You can actually beat the book. And that's how you get more people engaged. Not that, this is just an absolute farce. You can't win betting with bookmakers, but that's the message they've allowed to be sold with all this nonsense. I mean, there was a thing today, Jeff Banks put something up, and a Betfred advert that was like all about, the lads meet and they put their hackers on and they all know how much they talk to each other, so they know how much they're losing, or they don't take the betting too far. And it's like the same Betfred that's operating in America is saying, the more you bet, the more we'll give you in bonuses. I mean, make it stop.
The way they sell it buys into the narrative that you've
Yeah.
got no
It's
chance,
the new
doesn't it?
tobacco.
Yeah.
All gambling is bad. Stock market, that's fine. That's investing. Betting on horses or sport, that's for mugs. Shares, that's for professionals. And unfortunately, you said about culture, etc. The younger generation, I've spoken to quite a few people who are non-punters, and the perception that non-punters have purely by consuming the content in the mainstream media is that all gambling's bad. So I said to someone the other day, you said you like a bet, yeah, or are you a degenerate gambler? Well, kind of probably am, but I said no, just for the sake of form. And I said to him, do you like a drink? And he said, yeah. I said, are you an alcoholic? Well, of course I'm not an alcoholic. I said, well, why does someone who has an occasional recreational bet suddenly become a degenerate gambler, and yet you, as a social drinker, aren't an alcoholic? And it's about framing that argument, and we've lost that battle for hearts and minds, as Stuart said at the beginning, because these dissenting voices went unopposed for so long. They've now got the middle ground. They're now reasonable. Their agenda is simply to stop people ruining their lives. What's wrong with that? Are you in favour of social harm? Well, of course not. Then you must be with us. And that's the problem. It's all about perception. But Stuart says he's right. What next? Season tickets for football? Holidays? Scratch cards? Alcohol? If they get this through, then I guarantee you something else will be identified as being a major contributor to social harm, and there'll be affordability checks on football season tickets. You spend too much going to the football. We need to sort of, reduce that.
Stuart, a couple of subjects to finish the show. Losing the better 3-year-olds. It seems to be happening more often these days. Is that solely down to prize money, Stuart, do you think?
I think it's the huge draw in Australia and places like Hong Kong, where the amounts that they're racing for. There's $1 million race every week in Australia now. We have 3 a year here, I think. There's one every week. So unless you're Coolmore or Godolphin or one of the Arabs, when the people come knocking with these big offers for these horses, very few people can afford to turn them down.
Yeah.
You saw this week that Joseph O'Brien sold to Hong Kong. When people like Joseph O'Brien are selling their best horses, and these weren't mugs, these were horses that had been placed in group races as 2-year-olds, would have in another year been primed for a classic sort of thing. Maybe not the Newmarket 2000 guineas, but they'd have gone for the Irish guineas or the French guineas or something like that, and they're being sold to Hong Kong now. I think the other side of it is also a lot of the owners now, especially in Newmarket, are remote. They're not local people, they're not English people. So they don't come and see the horses, they don't go to the races and see them run unless it's at one of the big meetings. So they're much more of a commodity, a thing to be traded, rather than something you prize as a possession because you've got a good horse.
Yeah. Just digressing slightly, because obviously last year you had a very good horse in Quinault. What's the update and latest with him? I presume he's not being sold privately or anything.
No, he hasn't been sold. No, Tom was very adamant very early on. We had a very big offer for him after he won the second time he won at Newmarket early in the year.
Yeah.
And it was definitely, the offer was more than the horse was worth at the time. It was a very, very fair offer, again, to go to Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And Tom decided then that he didn't want to sell him And I just said to everyone that rang up after that he wasn't for sale. So luckily we got to keep him. And yeah, he's been out for a break since the end of the year, come back in big and well. He's off 102 now. So he's not going to do what he did last year this year, but I'm still hopeful that there might be a bit of improvement in him. He'll have to go one way or the other because he's kind of at the top end of where he can be handicap wise right now. So hopefully he can step up and go into group company at some stage.
Yeah, that's the hope, isn't it? You never know. You and Tom will have sort of ideas of an ideal race, but the problem is, like you say, because he progressed so much last year, such a tough horse. You don't see it very often, horses that can do that at that level. You see horses go from 50 to 80,
Yeah.
but you don't see horses go when they start in the big handicaps. And God, he fought like a lion. And I'm a big fan of him, so I hope he does make that next step. But like you say, you'll never know until you hit the track with that. But
No, we've got to do it.
yeah, you have to see, and I hope he does. If his constitution's still there and
Yeah.
he's got that enthusiasm he had last year, God, he's some horse.
He wants to win.
I even said on a pod, I think last year, I said, what a dream if you could own like even 2 or 3 of them in your stable, the horses that want to do it, and brilliant. What constitution. So, yeah, losing the better 3-year-olds, it could be a problem. We might see races like the Britannia where you can get in off 83, 82. Who knows what's going to happen? Usually, though, the sales happen after the Britannia, so that's probably a poor example.
If you finish in the first 6 in the Britannia, it's $1 million plus. If
Yeah.
you pass the vet and you're in the first 6 in the Britannia, it's $1 million plus to go to Hong Kong. That's the race.
King Kong are banging on the door, exactly. And that's the pressure that, like you've said, Stuart, that if you're not a big owner, and fair play to Tom Morley, that's kudos. He could easily have said, well, do you know what, that offers more than fair, like you've said. But no, brilliant. What a good story. Clerks. What's your opinion of Clerk of the Courses since we last spoke? Have they improved? I noticed, and I don't know if you did, Andrew Cooper, I think, improved since we did a pod on him over watering. He produced fast ground at last year's Eclipse. It was lovely fast ground. Have you any view on Clark's sort of since we last spoke? Are they the same?
You asking me this question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, I think they've got a very difficult job, and I pointed you in the direction of Sir Mark's King for a Day thing before, where
You did.
this is not a seasonal problem. It's going back years and years and years. And to produce the right kind of ground on the day I think, is very difficult. I just wish they would be a little less liberal close to the meetings with the water. I'd much prefer them to water pre-meeting for grass growth and then say, right, it's this is it, the start of the meetings, whatever it is, and it'll stay like that. And if it rains, it rains. If it doesn't rain. The July meeting last year, the first day when Quinault won the 6 furlong race, the ground was really quick ground, proper flat racing ground, middle of the summer, July course, flat racing ground, real quick. It had a splash of rain on it the next day, and it was an absolute bog for the July Cup.
Yeah.
And it was just because they'd put a little bit of water on overnight, and then they have a splash of rain on it, and all of a sudden it's a mud bath, and they're darting all over the course. No one knows which way to go, and it just makes a mockery of it all. We've got a new clerk of the course at Newmarket this year, so
Yay! Flags are out. Yes.
interesting to see how he gets on. He came and introduced himself to us the other day, and seems a very intelligent guy. He's worked in Australia and some of the courses out there and Chester, and so he's been about and he's experienced, and hopefully you'll have a few more new ideas. So that might be interesting.
Maybe you can sort the July course out.
Yeah, let's hope so.
On that, would you prefer the French model of where, like, say, Longchamp, out of summer or, well, even autumn, they would tip up like 20, 30 mil, douse it 4 or 5 days before the day, and then that's it, no more?
No, they're a law to themselves in France.
Are
They
they?
can do whatever they like. I've been to Chantilly, walked the track in the morning, it was good to firm, raced in the afternoon, and it was good to soft.
All right, yeah.
Honestly, they do what they do what suits whoever's best favoured on the day.
Oh, dirty France.
Usually not the foreigners.
Yeah, dirty France. Disgraceful behaviour. I think we've just covered everything. Your expertise at a sale, right? Let's say you got like a small owner that wanted to buy a horse not got much money, I know you'd say to him honestly, like, you'd say, nah, I don't. But let's say he was desperate to do so. What type of horse would you look for? You go to the sale, give something just sound. Is that the most important thing?
Oh, the most important thing is their sound. You can't go and buy a lame horse, especially a used horse. If you go into the yearling sales, it's a bit of a lottery, and you're buying a ticket to the lottery, and it doesn't matter how many times people can tell you this is a good one and that's a good one. Nobody actually knows.
Yeah.
So taking a ticket to the lottery at the yearling sales. If you go into the horses in training sales, it's still you're taking a punt, but at least you've got some form to go on. Sometimes you can go and see the horse yourself. You can trot it up and vet it and stuff like that sort of things. You can vet the yearlings, but you can't trot them up or anything. You just see them walk.
When you got the horses in training sales, Stuart,
Yeah.
would you have a trigger in your head where you could say, there's a bunch of trainers you don't mind buying off one little bit, and there's a bunch of trainers that you wouldn't touch with a barge pole, their horses?
Yeah, there'd be a number of trainers that I'd be very reluctant to buy horses from,
Yeah.
but everyone else, I think, be fair game.
Mhm.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
interesting. Right, final question, Stuart, just for our listeners, really, without upsetting any of your owners, certainly people that might like a bet. Have you got anything in the yard that's worth punting going forwards?
It's early in the year. Obviously, we've had a good start to the year, actually, on the all weather.
Yes.
The horse has been running well. Tom bought a nice horse, actually, that finished behind Quinault at York, a horse called Eminency.
Yes.
He finished fourth at the handicap at York that Quinault won. He claimed from Clive Cox's. We paid quite a bit of money for him. He's been gelded, and we're just getting him ready to head back to the races shortly. So he might be one for your listeners to follow.
Like finding the right race, and absolutely, yeah, he got ability last year. Very interesting one to follow. Interesting that Tom liked him after finishing behind Quinault Eminency. Good stuff. Right. I think that rounds the show up nicely. Any other questions for Stuart, John, Chris?
No, that's brilliant. Just listening wrapped, actually, really, really interesting.
It is. It's enlightening to get someone on like Stuart.
Better than the usual rubbish that we talk. It's nice to listen to someone who knows what they're talking about. Yeah.
Absolutely, the usual rabble.
Listen, it's very kind of you to invite me on. And can I just say that the stuff about the affordability checks that you talk about is definitely not rubbish. And you've been bang on the money for ages and before most people have as well. So don't do yourselves down all the time. You've put this at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. And I thoroughly enjoy listening to your podcasts, even if some of it is a bit shit now and again.
Exactly, not
Yeah,
totally shit. You have nailed that,
Thank you.
Stuart. You have nailed that, and you're always welcome back on the show.
Yes.
We'll have you on again next year to see the state of the game, how it's progressed since this podcast. Also, regarding our schedule for the week ahead, we've got an exciting week. Yes, for Patreon subscribers, on Wednesday, we've got John Leng and the Stout Years. Yes. What is not to like about that, chaps? This is going to be good. John reveals plenty about his days working with the Barbadian Baron at Freemason Lodge back in the heyday. And just to say, there will be no Friday shows for the next 2 Fridays as Bar Stewards take a winter podcast break on the Friday show. There will, however, be a Sunday show next week, which has been pre-recorded for the sermon, which is the best coups, gambles, and bankruptcies in racing, as voted by me, John, and Chris. So plenty to look forward to. Hope you enjoyed this. Bye for now.